9 years. It's been 9 years since The Last of Us hit the PS3, with Naughty Dog providing an absolute masterpiece to give Sony's third console a fitting send-off. With a remaster and a sequel already in the bag, the studio that's produced technical magic time after time bring their book of spells to the PS5, with a full remake of the seminal title. With rebuilt assets, a ton of power to throw at it, the question remains, is it worth the asking price? Well, yes, but also no. For those who've been living under a rock since 2013, allow me to catch you up. The Last of Us gives witness to the birth of a deadly pandemic through the eyes of Joel. After one of the most unforgettable opening sequences in gaming history, it snaps forward to a relatively normal life in a massively abnormal world. Infected humans swarm over the landscape, sniffing out others to tear apart and devour, a result of the cordyceps-based sickness that swept the globe. Dotted across the US are groups of survivors ready to do whatever it takes to endure and survive in this bold and frightening new world. It's established that Joel's a smuggler, and his latest job is to transport some human cargo across country in the form of Ellie. A 14-year-old girl with an immunity to the plague, she's billed as the last hope for humanity in the hope that they can find a vaccine. In a nutshell, that's the plot. Of course, there are a million one intricacies that come into play, with all sorts of narrative elements taking centre stage. As the tale progresses, the nature of humanity, the nobility of lying, and the necessity for violence all come to the fore, with the hardened nature of Joel as a survivor slowly eroding as he forms a bond with Ellie throughout the game. At this point though, there's not really too much else to say on the story of The Last of Us that hasn't already been said. It remains one of the most highly rated games of all time, and its impact cannot be overstated, having pushed forward the way that gaming narratives are not only crafted, but regarded as well. So, what is there in this package that's new for people who've been invested in the world since the original? Well, truth be told, not a great deal, at least on paper. There are no new story elements to speak of, no new sequences, no new cutscenes. This is as faithful a remake as you could hope for better and for worse. What is brought to the table though are a new permadeath mode, giving you one shot to get through the entire game, and a speedrun mode, which will time you on your playthroughs if you want to truly test yourself. Both of these are unlocked after completion of the story once. There are also some cool new unlockables featuring a model viewer, and some extra skins for Joel and Ellie for subsequent playthroughs. Also included here is the excellent Left Behind DLC, as well as the Grounded documentary, much like they were in Remastered. However, the meat in the pie comes in the form of the technical enhancements. First and foremost, I played through the game in performance mode, and during my entire run I didn't notice a single point at which the frame rate dropped. This is with the enhanced resolution that the PS5 has to offer, with dynamic 4K or 1440p being targeted throughout. The fidelity mode present is a native 4K with a locked 30 frames a second if you'd prefer to have that option. There is an option to unlock the frame rate entirely if you have a TV that's capable of VRR or a refresh rate above 60Hz as well. When this is enabled, the fidelity mode switches to 40 frames a second at a native 4K, much like Ratchet & Clank and Spider-Man did with their performance RT modes. From the testing I've done on my LG C10, fidelity mode sticks to this 40 frames a second like glue, while the performance mode takes advantage of the unlocked frame rate ranging anywhere between 80 and 100 frames a second, showing that there is still headroom well above that 60 frames a second mark. The obvious and immediate improvement though comes with the visuals. Those who've played Remastered will have already had the treat of running the game at a solid 60 frames a second, but the graphical overhaul here is simply phenomenal. If you weren't aware of this as a PS3 or PS4 game, you would immediately put this up in the top tier of visual spectacles on the current generation. Of course, the fact the game is fundamentally designed around an older architecture gives the artists and graphics teams a huge amount of headroom to push the wow factor of what you can see. Starting with the character models, the level of detail that's on display here is nothing short of mind-boggling. The skin of characters stretches as they grimace and emote, fabric becomes visibly heavier as it gets wet and dries off in real time. Faces of enemies are so frighteningly detailed that you can truly see the light go out behind their eyes as you attack them from the shadows and choke them out. When a game is this dark in tone, the depictions of violence and the macabre really start to hit home even more. Of course, there's been some discussion around the redesign of some of the characters, Tess in particular, but they're changes that work and fit in so much more with the world that Naughty Dog have crafted. The Last of Us is nothing, of course, without its environmental design, and with this remake they shine even more. While Remastered ran at its higher frame rate and resolution, it was only taking the original game's assets and slotting them into that larger pipeline. With Part 1, almost everything has been meticulously reconstructed. There's more overgrown shrubbery, more decaying wood, more dusty buildings, and coupled with the higher quality of asset comes a previously unseen level of destructibility of them. If you happen to attract the attention of a foe, hiding behind cover often results in bullets ricocheting off surfaces with damage being left on them. Walls crumble to dust under automatic weapon fire, desks have their contents spilled, and barriers break as you try and escape. The outside world has never felt more lush and vibrant while simultaneously feeling muted and oppressive. Enemy encounters take on a new feeling here as well. Expanding on the AI improvements found in The Last of Us Part 2, Part 1 expands on the flanking manoeuvres and enemy behaviour, making previously straightforward encounters feel a bit more fresh, tense and exciting. For the most part, the infected will still run at you head first, but the human enemies definitely have more about them. Even during a section that I dropped down to the lowest difficulty to speed up my playthrough, they were flanking and coming up behind me much more than I remember them ever doing in the original. It adds another layer of dynamism to the gameplay, and it will definitely be a treat for long-time fans of the game. Unfortunately, the dodge and prone mechanics from The Last of Us Part 2 are conspicuous by their absence, and I definitely found myself wanting to hit circle to dodge out of the way on more than one occasion. But I suppose this makes sense, given that Joel is an older protagonist here than Ellie is in the sequel. The final thing to mention here is the suite of accessibility options available. Much like Part 2, Naughty Dog have gone all out to make sure that everyone can play this game. Whether it's the high contrast mode, which provides outlines of everything against a grey background, to the audio descriptive cutscenes, or the ingenious addition of allowing dialogue to be felt through the DualSense's haptics, this is probably one of the most accessible titles on PS5 for anyone with a disability. I could go on for hours about the myriad of other subtle improvements that the game has nestled under its belt, but playing through this story once again had me feeling waves of nostalgia. See, The Last of Us was the first preview that I ever wrote. It was my first real experience of going hands-on with a game that was still in development, as opposed to a final build of something that was awaiting review. It's a game that's stuck with me over the past 9 years. The final scene is seared into my brain, with that swear to me discussion occasionally finding its way into my memory. It's a game that had so much of an impact on me personally that I named my cat Ellie. And seeing the work that's gone into bringing it to life on the PS5 made me appreciate it all over again. Like watching your favourite movie on a pristine 4K disc after seeing it on DVD for all those years, or listening to an album from your favourite band reissued in stereo after only hearing it on the original mono recordings. The Last of Us Part 1 was the kind of experience that feels all too fleeting in the current times we live in. A comforting dose of familiarity in a world of uncertainty and fear. That brings me in a roundabout fashion to whether the game's worth picking up for the full price tag that's been slapped on it. With Remastered being available on PS Plus's extra tier, the question will really be, is it worth 70 quid for some more graphical assets and AI? And ultimately, I can't answer that question for everybody. What I can say though is that between this and the upcoming PC version of the game, The Last of Us Part 1 is the best way to play an absolutely essential title. A true remake of a seminal game, The Last of Us Part 1 doesn't bring anything new to the table from a story perspective, but what it does do is provide the definitive version of one of my favourite games of all time. Visually breathtaking, it belies its 9-year-old roots to develop a spectacular experience. Whether it's worth the money is up to the individual, but Joel and Ellie's story will never look or feel better than this. Thank you for joining us, guys. If you have enjoyed this video, please do drop us a like, leave us a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel, because we're going to have plenty more videos coming up very shortly. Alright, take care, guys. Bye-bye.